Hey everybody, I'm Chris. This is Lisa. She's gonna be helping me today. We're gonna make some rye bread. So the first thing we're gonna do is get a really big bowl, because if you have a big bowl, you have less mess. Don't have this big a bowl, not to worry. You can use a smaller bowl, but I like to use the biggest bowl I have so it doesn't splash out. And because we're making it by hand, it gives us a lot of room to work with. And of course my scale doesn't want to behave, so hang on just a sec. We want to get it on and to 0. Okay. Hang on a second. We might. All right, the scale's working now. Here we go. We're going to 0 it out. And the first thing we're going to do is put room temperature water, okay? It's just tap water, room temperature water. You can use bottled water if you want, but you want to make sure it's room temperature because you don't want to freeze out your yeast and you don't want to boil your yeast. So there we go. All right, we're going to use 700 grams of water. And you just watch it go up and up and up and up and up. And if you put too much, you take some out. If you put too little, you just keep adding until you're at 700. This should be fairly close. I've made this recipe a few times. Yep, 700, there we go. And to that, we're gonna add 16 grams of yeast. I'm using a instant yeast today. Lisa, get on in here. She's trying to escape. So we'll start with a tablespoon. Now we're at about 11. We want to be at 16, so we're just gonna keep adding slowly.
Now, where do you buy such a huge amount of instant yeast?
Oh, that's a good question. I bought this on Amazon.
Okay.
You can buy little packets, and it's gonna be roughly, you know, about 1.5 packets of yeast. But it's easier to buy it in big quantities, especially if you're gonna be baking a lot, which I do. So it's always handy to have that. So now we're at 16 grams of yeast. To that, we're going to add, and notice that it's, you know, floating on top of the water. You don't even need to mix it in yet. We're gonna 0 it out. That's very important, so you make sure that you're back to 0. We're gonna add 100 grams of this sprouted rye flour. Now, if all you can get is regular rye flour, that's perfectly okay. So we're just gonna pour it in until we get to 100. And if it goes slightly over, that's okay. You can adjust your other flours. My allergies are crazy, so I'm all congested as usual. 70, 80, and 100. There we go. All right. Thank you. I'm going to get a big wooden spoon. This is a big wooden spoon. We're just going to go ahead and mix that in. At this point, you could just leave it. I just like to mix it in because the rye helps the yeast get going.
And why is it important to use a wooden spoon versus a metal or plastic?
So it doesn't really matter. I just like the length of this one because it's such a big bowl that my other ones don't have a very long handle, in which case my hand would be in there. And you'll see that when I mix, I actually mix with my hand. So now we're gonna add the unbleached, unbromated white flour. And we're gonna add to that about 750 grams of flour. Okay. So we're gonna 0 that out. And we know it's roughly 6 cups or so. So we're just gonna go ahead and add that as we go.
500. 680.
Thank you. Here we go. It's a little bit over, but that's not a problem. We can always adjust our water. And now we're gonna add our salt. I'm using kosher salt. I find that it works, it's a little bit more balanced. It's not quite as strong as iodized salt. So for me, it's a much cleaner salt. So you can use this, you can use sea salt. Either one works great. All right, so let's check our numbers here. We need 25 grams of salt. So we're just gonna put it in the center in case we go over, we can take some out. And this is the beauty of using a scale. Okay. And I've said this before, I like salty bread. I do not like bread that does not have flavor. All right, and to that we are going to add, especially if you like it, 10 grams of caraway seeds. So first I put it in the cap, 0 this sucker out. So we're gonna be making marble rye. So the first one we're doing is just a straight rye dough. And you can add more rye flour to this because you'll see it's not really a great quantity of rye flour, but the more rye that you add, the more dense your bread's gonna be. So you can decide how dense you like your bread. And the more rye that you have, the wetter the dough, the longer the time you have to keep it in the oven. You're gonna reach your internal temperature of 200 degrees by the time you bake it. So you're just gonna keep watching it, especially if it's a super wet dough. You really have to keep your eye on how long you're baking it for, because otherwise you're just gonna have that gummy inside, and that's disgusting. So, all right, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna mix this. So we'll take it off of our scale. Here we go. And on my impeccably clean hands, because I washed and scrubbed them, I'm gonna go ahead and start in the center and just swirl it around. Swirl and swirl and swirl. So notice I'm not kneading, I'm just mixing. And you can get a little more aggressive when you're mixing. Make sure that all your flour is picked up. So no more dry bits.
Chris, you had mentioned in one of your previous videos about flour that gets up on the side of the bowl.
Yep.
Now, why again is that important that you scrape it all off?
So otherwise, what happens is when you refrigerate it, and we're gonna actually switch bowls, what happens is it gets a little conglomerated on the sides, and then when it dries out and you get that into your mix of dough, you get those little crunchy, funky pieces in your bread dough, and nobody wants to eat those crunchy, funky pieces.
No.
So to make sure that you get all of it up before you let it rise. So that's what we're going to do. I'm gonna go ahead and do this. And again, I don't know if you noticed this, but I kept my flour and my salt separated until we started to mix. This allows the yeast to bloom and not to be retarded by the fermentation retarded by the salt. So you want it to have full activation. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and transfer bowls and let this rise, and then we're gonna make the pumpernickel dough so that we can make a marble rye. All right, I'll be back. We're back, and this time Lisa's gonna put it together. And this is her first time, so I'm gonna walk her through it. So we're gonna go ahead, I zeroed out the scale, the bowl's on. We're gonna add 700 grams of water.
Okay.
So, can you see it?
Now I can.
Should be about the whole glass. Sounds like you're taking a pee.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Alrighty. So if you go a little over, you can just take a little bit out. So you're back at about 700. Whoops. There we go. Perfect. Okay, now we're gonna add to that 16 grams of yeast. I'm gonna dry our measuring spoon off since I had it down. Shift everything a little bit this way. Here we go.
Okay.
I'm gonna zero that out.
Okay.
Yep, and you're gonna add 16 grams of yeast, which is roughly about a tablespoon and a half.
Okay.
There's a fly. Hold on.
Right
okay.
there. 16 grams,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Close, close. 14. Keep going. Be fearless.
Yeah, right.
If you go a little over, it's not gonna kill anything. Keep going. Oh, a little bit more.
That 15 is huge.
I know, right?
Yes. There we go.
Okay.
Got it.
Good. And then we're gonna get our rye flour again.
Okay.
And we're getting 100 grams of rye flour. So just sprinkle it over there until you get to 100. We'll zero that out. Very important. Always zero it out or your numbers will not be right.
Now, why is it important that you use a digital scale versus a cup of this or whatever?
Well, it's gonna be more exact.
Okay.
And depending on where you live, not everybody has cup measures. Some people do metrics, whatever. This way, you can always be specific. It's easier to do. Also, you're only using one measurement rather than all the measuring cups and all the different things you need. Keep on trucking. A little more. Be fearless. It always seems hard when you're doing it. You're like, okay, close.
There.
Perfect. Perfect. Good job. And now we need 750 of white, unbleached, unbromated flour. I use King Arthur. That's the school that I went to learn bread, so I'm very specific to that. And actually, I'm gonna switch things up for just a second. I'm sorry. I forgot that we're making the pumpernickel. So we want to add our cocoa powder into the wet ingredients first so that it blends easier. So we're going to add to this, we're going to add 20 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder. So I'm using the dark, okay? So 20 grams of that. And that's a little clumpy, so just know that it comes out fast. Keep on trucking.
You say that.
Well, I jinxed you. What can I say? Keep going.
And then a whole huge clump will come out.
Oh, that's the way it goes. That's okay. A little extra isn't going to kill anybody. A little more. One more. Good. Perfect. Now we're going to go ahead and mix that because we really want to get that cocoa powder all mixed in. That's going to give us some great flavor. And that's where that color comes from. A nice dark rye color. All right. And you know, it doesn't taste chocolatey at all because there's no sweetness to it. So all it's going to do is enhance the rye flavor. All right, so now we're going to put our 750 of flour in there. I'm going to zero that back out, which is roughly about 6 cups of flour.
Okay. I'm still watching the scale.
Yeah, you're good.
And we want to go for 700, 750?
750.
750. Okay. Now, where do you buy these scales at?
Any kitchen store will have them. Some grocery stores have them. Just look in the section where you have all the pots and pans and things like that. Perfect. Nice and close. Ta-da! Done. And now we're going to add our salt.
Okay.
25 grams of salt. I will zero it out. And then our caraway, and then we're going to mix. Keep on going. There you go. You're right there. Perfect. And then we're going to add our caraway seeds. 10 grams of caraway seeds. So you can go ahead and sprinkle it out and zero it out. Perfect. The first little bit goes quick, and then you're like, okay. Perfect. And I love caraway, so for me, that is not a problem. And of course, I put it all over the counter, which is always great. And then Lisa's gonna go ahead and mix it, so I'm gonna move the scale.
Okay.
And you know, this is the first time you do it, the dough is very sticky. So, you know, it's interesting. If you're a person that does not like the feel of dough or having it stick to your hands, you can always do a little spray oil on your hands. So, you know, a little bit of this olive oil or avocado oil on your hands helps it so that it doesn't glob onto you. But, you know, eventually you're gonna get some on you. One trick is to wash your hands with cold water. If you wash your hands with hot water in the beginning, it melts the dough into your hands and you can't really get it off. So go with cold water, and then once it's all off, then you can wash with hot water. So you're doing great. Just keep turning your bowl. Start to kind of squeeze your dough. Yep.
Yes, it feels like nice wet mud.
Right?
Remember when we were kids and
mud
made
pies.
mud pies?
Yes, I love mud pies. They're fun.
And you can smell the chocolate.
Mm-hmm. You definitely can. And actually, I'm gonna have you taste the dough after you mix it. I know it's raw dough. You're just gonna put it in your mouth and get the feel of it because it's important. And you'll notice that it does not taste anything like chocolate. Perfect. That's the perfect mix. So let's show what it looks like. It looks like a bunch of blob. Beautiful. But I'm telling you, it's gonna taste delicious. So you're gonna have to trust me. And I'm gonna show you what it looks like done too. We made some dough earlier. So I'm gonna show you how to form the loaves, and then I'm gonna show you what the loaf looks like. Let me tell you, it is worth this process. What you're gonna do after this is you're gonna cover it and you're gonna refrigerate it overnight. And then tomorrow, gonna let it come room temperature, form your loaves, let it rise, and bake it off. All right, Miss Lisa, here we go. Gonna give you a blob.
Thank you. I have to eat the whole blob?
You can just put a little tiny taste in your mouth and just, you can spit it out afterwards too. Here, I'll get you a paper towel. You don't necessarily want to eat it, you just want to taste it.
Oh, no, for me.
Yeah. I mean, you can, it's not gonna hurt you, but yum! I mean, it's not sweet, right?
No, it's so not sweet.
It is so not sweet. Okay, so we're gonna cover this, let it rise. We're gonna park it in the refrigerator overnight and take it out. I'm gonna show you what it looks like once it's done. All right. And you might think, what in the world is it doing in a bag? Well, that is the way I store it in the refrigerator because it expands. And so what you want to do is, you'll see that it has much more gluten to it. It's nice and stretchy.
It's not sticky.
It's not sticky. It's softer, so you get lots of good strands in there. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to form up a loaf. Grab a pan. I'm going to wash hands. Lisa's going to wash her hands. And we'll do a couple of these loaves. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up our space here. And I'm going to tilt this down so you can actually see the dough. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reach in. I'm going to grab a hunk of this dough. Now look, I've been making bread for years, so I'm used to dealing with the stickiness of the dough. Don't let it intimidate you. Just think like you're a little kid. Notice I'm rolling it in, pulling it in, making it round, okay? It doesn't matter what shape your bread is. I'm telling you now, it doesn't matter. It's gonna be tasty no matter what shape it is. So there you go. Now to that, I'm gonna add a little bit of flour to the top. Why? It's a gluten coat, so it's gonna keep the bread from getting crusty on the outside while it rises. We're gonna cover it too, but it's gonna keep it from getting funky. I love that word. All right, so now Lisa's gonna come over and grab a bunch of dough. And I'm gonna help her form a loaf as well. These are free-form loaves. You can certainly use a loaf pan if you want to, but I prefer this because you get more crust. And I am all about that crust. So I'm gonna pull out a blob of dough and I'm gonna hand it to Lisa. And she's gonna roll it around with me. Come on camera. Oh, I can see ya. I'm gonna grab this one. Oh, good. And you will see that we've already married up the two doughs. So some is pumpernickel and some is rye. So we're gonna get a nice marble look to it. Here we go. So you're gonna start here and you're just gonna fold it over itself. Fold it over itself. Good. And look, it's a nice round. Now, if you want a longer loaf, you just pull. So you have a nice longer loaf and place. I'm gonna get Lisa a pan so she can do the same. I'm using this non-stick foil because I find it very easy to work with. I do have parchment paper, but I find it easier to work with because it doesn't stick at all. Go, honey. Wash that sucker down.
Yes.
We're gonna dust it with some flour.
All right.
And then we'll let it rise for an hour. And then we'll score it. We'll bake it at 450 degrees for 40 minutes. About halfway through, I change places. So the ones on the top goes on the bottom, and the ones on the bottom goes on the top. And then I'm gonna show you what it looks like. So hold tight. All righty. So we just took some bread out of the oven. This is what it looks like. This is the marble rye that we were talking about, where we combine both doughs together and form the loaf with both pieces. This is what it's gonna look like. So we're gonna take a little taste. Again, it was 40 minutes in the oven, internal temperature of 200 degrees. See, it's got a nice crust on it. I'll show you the interior. So you've got a nice marble effect, hence the name, marble rye. The first few slices are always the most difficult.
Now to check your internal temperature,
Use an internal read thermometer. So just like an instant read, like you would use for meat. Yep. Pop it in the center. Usually, if you're gonna, present the loaf, do it from the bottom. So you don't have a nice big hole in the center, but it doesn't really matter if it's just for you. So here we go. I'm gonna take a little taste of this bread. Got some Caraway butter, always my favorite. Grab a knife. Being the great taste testers that we are, Lisa doesn't mind my fingers. I'm gonna lob some butter on there for her. Grab some for me. And we'll give this a little taste.
cheers.
Cheers, here we go, get right in here. So good. Well worth the wait. You really need to try it. And if you do try it, pardon me for talking a mouthful, but if you do try it, let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions, feel free to message me, leave a comment. I'll get back to you, I promise. Have a great day. Enjoy. Bye.